Welcome to my presentation over Chapter 4, John Friedman's The Good City in Defense of Utopian Thinking by Eddie Colin Munoz. Some of the concepts outlined in this chapter are utopian tradition in planning and an explanation of utopian thinking, and also the elements for John Friedman's The Good City, which are theoretical considerations, human flourishing as a fundamental human right, multiplicity as a primary good, and good governance. If you were to look up the word utopia on Merriam-Webster online, you would find the definition: a place of ideal perfection, especially in laws, government, and social conditions, also an impractical scheme for social improvement. Oddly enough, another definition for utopia is an imaginary and indefinitely remote place. So I think that's pretty ironic that a place of ideal perfection is also an imaginary place. As far as utopian thinking, beyond the alternative constructions of religion, ideology, and nationalism, utopian thinking, according to Friedman, can help us choose a path into the future that we believe is justified because its concrete imagery is informed by values which are precious to us. According to him, there are two moments that are inextricably connected in utopian thinking. The first one is critique, which is the observation of certain aspects in our present conditions, such as injustices, oppression, ecological devastation. So once we see, injustices happen, part of human instinct could be that we want to make that better, that we want to improve the conditions of our surrounding areas. Other words that come to mind, symbols, can be freedom, equality, solidarity. The other moment is constructive vision, also concrete vision. This is where the uncensored public expression of opinions is allowed and should become the substance of political argument. Utopian thinking is thus not at all about fairy tales, but about genuine futures around which political coalitions may be built. As far as utopian tradition in planning, according to Susan Feinstein, in her account, some important values as far as thinking about cities include material equality, cultural diversity, democratic participation, and ecological sustainability. Now, Friedman sort of agrees with this, but goes on to say that utopian tradition in planning should also include a blend of ideas, a blend of communication between citizens of the city, and where the needs of all people are taken into consideration for the greater good of the community to form the good city. Another element of Friedman's The Good City are the theoretical considerations, particularly whose city are we talking about and which cities can we include in this. Are we talking only about first world cities? Can we include third world cities in this? Are we talking only Western industrialized urban cities? Or can we include small villages in, let's say, Africa or China? The political climate also is very important to take into consideration. For the sake of his argument and for the sake of his model of the good city, Friedman focuses on democratic regions. The idea of the common good, is it achievable through politics only or people? And throughout the chapter, and according to Friedman, he basically states that people are responsible for the achieving the common good for the good city. Another concept is process versus outcomes. According to Friedman, democratic proceduralists believe in process over outcomes, and this is because they assume that the differences among the parties in contention are relatively minor. And according to the book, today's majority will become tomorrow's minority, and vice versa. Everybody, so to speak, gets their turn in the long run. Now, democratic procedure is only effective when there is no direct opposition by those who are so persuaded of the rightness of their own ethical position that they lack patience with democratic procedure, pursuing their ends by whatever means are at hand. And very important paragraph towards the bottom of process versus outcomes on page 94. My own position is to deny the separation of ends and means, outcomes, and process. Process, by which I specifically mean democratic procedures, is no less important than desirable outcomes. But democratic procedures are likely to be abandoned if they do not lead, in the longer term, to broadly acceptable outcomes. Moreover, process in a liberal democracy also includes the nonviolent struggles for social justice and other concerns that take place outside the formal institutional framework. And then he goes on to say that the imaginary of the good city has to embrace both of these terms. So process and outcome are equally important as a theoretical consideration. According to Friedman, one of the most important elements to achieve what he calls the good city is human flourishing, and human flourishing as a fundamental human right. He states that every human being has the right by nature to the full development of their innate intellectual, physical, and spiritual potentials in the context of wider communities. And basically what he's saying is that everyone deserves a fair start in life, although he goes on to admit that not everyone does. Not everyone is born into a wealthy family. Not everyone has, the basic equalities at birth. But it is later on that as long as these equalities are available to that person, then they can therefore flourish. Some of the basic equalities that he is talking about are public education, public health, graduated income tax, civil rights legislation, and I would go on to say myself, as it pertains to the built environment, as long as everyone has access to public transportation, affordable housing, and access to services, such as medical services, could be grocery store, post office. Those are all basic equalities that everyone should have to flourish. He also states necessary conditions for human flourishing are political, economic, social, physical, and ecological conditions. These must be present because, according to him, human flourishing is inconceivable without them. He also states that this serves as a template for judging performance of cities. Aside from human flourishing, another template that could be used to judge the performance of cities is multiplicity as a primary good. And by this, Friedman means an autonomous civil life relatively free from direct supervision and control by the state. A vibrant civil life is a necessary social context for human flourishing. Multiplicity acknowledges the priority of civil society, which is the sphere of freedom and social reproduction, and it is for its sake that the city can be said to exist. He goes on to say that in today's world, our large urban cities are basically meccas of cultural diversity. They are filled with people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, who possibly fled an area of oppression to seek freedom, to be around people that are like them, to have that sense of community in the larger city. And so he says that the good city is composed of political, social, religious, cultural communities with economic components as well. So cultural diversity is very important to achieve the good city. He also goes on to say that cities are not always hospitable, and mutual tolerance of difference must be safeguarded by the state so long as certain conditions are fulfilled, such as respect for human rights and the assumption of the rights and obligations of local citizenship. He also goes on to talk about the 4 pillars that support the material foundations for the good city. First in importance is adequate housing, together with complementary public services and community facilities such as schools, affordable health care, particularly for women, infants, the physically and mentally challenged, the chronically ill, and the elderly. Adequate remunerated work for all who seek it. So anyone that's in search of a well-paying job should be able to find at least some sort of job in the good city. Adequate social provision in housing, medical care, human services, and income must be made for the weakest citizens if their own efforts are insufficient to provide for what is regarded as the social minimum. And I believe he is talking about welfare and or unemployment benefits. The last element of the good city is the element of good governance. According to Friedman, he believes that decision-making should be made at higher levels, such as the local state, but include all participation from governments, including down to the city governments. What's been pronounced in the last couple of years is the participation of corporate capital, especially with private investments made for large city buildings and or toll roads in any given city. And there's also the importance of scale and public input. Not only is it important for city governments to participate in the decision-making process, but it's also important for neighborhoods to form their own mini or micro governments where the people of the neighborhoods can have their voices heard. He also presents criteria for assessing performance of local governments. The first criteria is inspired political leadership. That is to have leaders capable of articulating a common vision for the polity, building a strong consensus around this vision, and mobilizing resources towards its realization. Public accountability. That includes the right of citizens to be adequately informed about those who stand for elections, the standing government's performance record, and the overall outcomes for the city. Transparency and the right to information. Governance should be transparent in its manner of operation and as much as possible be carried out in full view of citizen observers. Inclusiveness, the right of all citizens to be directly involved in the formulation of policies, programs, and projects. Responsiveness, the primordial right of citizens is to claim rights and express grievances, to have access to appropriate channels for this purpose. And nonviolent conflict management, that is, institutionalized ways of resolving conflicts between state and citizens without resort to physical violence. And this is the last most important element for his theory behind the good city. In conclusion, the good city, according to Friedman, the summary at the end of the chapter suggests that Friedman used to believe in a dialogue-central utopian thinking about the good city. He then progressed on to taking more of an approach of human flourishing and multiplicity. Also, the utopian thinking is not a finite concept, but rather an ongoing discourse. He even suggests at the end, my image of the city remains incomplete, and I think that is proper, because no one should have a final say about the good city. Utopian thinking is an ongoing, time-binding discourse intended to inform our striving. It is no more than that, but also nothing less.